Hello. The story I'm going to tell you today took place in Daegu, a city located in southeastern South Korea. Daegu is situated in a basin surrounded by mountain ranges. It is the fourth largest city in South Korea and is often referred to as the backbone of the country. In the western part of the city, in the Dalseo district, stands a mountain named Waryeong, which is 299.1 meters high. The mountain is named for its shape, which resembles a dragon lying down. There is an observation deck at the summit, where one can enjoy a panoramic view of Daegu. Climbing this mountain is not very difficult, so during holidays and festivals, many people come to hike it. And then on this mountain, an event occurred that shocked all of South Korea. 5 boys went up the mountain to play and then disappeared without a trace. This case became one of the 3 most mysterious cases in South Korea, known as the Frog Boys Missing Case. Next, let us rewind time to March 26, 1991, to delve into the details of this incident. March 26, 1991 was a Tuesday. Although it was not the weekend, it was a public holiday called Chung, as local elections were being held across South Korea. For children, a day off from school meant joy. At 8:20 a.m., 6 boys were gathered playing together. Kim Jong-sik, 9 years old, Park Chan-in, 10 years old, Im Young-ju, 11 years old, Jo Ho-yeon, 12 years old, Woo Chol-won, 13 years old, and Kim Tae-ryong, 9 years old. All of them were students from grades 3 to 6 at Songseo Elementary School in Daegu. School was located right at the foot of Mount Waryeong, and the boys' homes were in nearby villages. At this time, they were playing near Jo Ho-yeon's house. In the middle of their play, a young tenant from the house came out and complained about the noise, telling them to go somewhere else to play. The children then gathered to discuss where to go next. Someone suggested going to Mount Waryeong to catch fire salamander eggs. Fire salamanders are amphibians that live in forests and mountains, laying between 10 to 60 eggs at a time. After deciding on the destination, the group dispersed, each going home to get their equipment and inform their families. Among the 6, Kim Tae-ryong, after telling his parents about the plan, was told that it was too far and was not allowed to go. He reluctantly gave up on the hike. The remaining 5 boys, carrying empty boxes for collecting eggs and sticks, set off towards Mount Waryeong, laughing and joking as they went. The morning passed quickly, and soon it was 12 noon. Boys, parents noticed their children had not come home and assumed they were just engrossed in play and had lost track of time, so they were not too concerned. It wasn't until 6:30 p.m. that Kim Jong-sik's mother began to feel uneasy. She paused her work to look outside, but the street was empty, and her son still had not returned. By now it was getting dark and the streets were quieter. Even though the boys were not strangers to the area and had visited before, it was unusual for them to be out so late. Kim Jong-sik's mother's anxiety grew, though she decided to go out and check the homes of her son's friends. On the way, she saw many people gathered, talking about something. Upon getting closer, she learned that the 5 boys who had gone up the mountain earlier had still not returned. The parents quickly gathered, took flashlights, and headed up the mountain to search. They called out the names of their children. There was no response. After searching for a long time without any sign of the children, 7:50 p.m., the parents descended the mountain and reported the incident to the police. Police, aware of the situation, did not immediately take action since the national elections were being held that day, and the officers were deployed to maintain order. Additionally, the time of the children's disappearance had not yet reached 24 hours. Therefore, the duty officer told the parents not to worry too much, as the children might return home soon. Seeing that the police were not taking immediate action, parents did not give up. They continued searching the mountain, joined by some concerned neighbors. Unfortunately, that night it started to rain, making the search even more challenging. Wearing raincoats and using flashlights, the searchers combed Mount Waryeong until 3 a.m. Everyone was exhausted and had to stop searching and return home. The next day, more than 300 people, including police and military personnel, were mobilized to search Mount Waryeong. In the afternoon, helicopters were also deployed to assist. The whereabouts of the 5 boys remained unknown. At the same time, police conducted a search and inquiry among households living near Mount Waryong. They gathered some information from witnesses. Jo Ho-yeon's older brother, one of the 5 missing boys, reported to the police that around 9 a.m. that day, while he was cycling home, he saw his younger brother along with 4 other boys walking up the mountain. He asked his brother where they were going, and the boy cheerfully replied that they were going to find fire salamander egg. After that, older brother advised him to come back home for lunch before leaving. A woman reported to the police that around 9:30 a.m. that day, after returning from voting, she saw 5 children with boxes and sticks happily heading towards Mount Waryong. She also heard them discussing whether they would make it home in time for lunch. At the time, she was hurrying home and did not pay much attention. A student named Heo Sung-hoon reported to the police that he and the 5 victims were all students of Seongseo Elementary School. However, he did not see his 5 friends that day. He mentioned that he and some other classmates had also gone to Mount Waryong that morning to look for fire salamander egg. Around 11:30 a.m., while Heo Sung-hoon was at the cemetery area on the mountain, he suddenly heard a distant scream. About 10 seconds later, he heard another scream, making it a total of 2. The scream sounded very frightening and did not resemble ordinary playful shouts. Out of fear, he did not dare to investigate the source of the screams. His parents believed that the screams might have been the victims calling for help after being attacked. However, the police did not consider this clue because another witness reported seeing the 5 boys at the foot of the mountain around 12 p.m. Therefore, the police concluded that the screams might have been made by birds or wild animals on the mountain. In addition, there were other witnesses providing information. For instance, 42-year-old local resident reported that around 4:30 p.m. that day, he saw 5 children playing near a pond close to the village. However, it should be noted that all witness statements were based on personal recollections, which could be inaccurate. Such inaccuracies could greatly affect the police's judgment. The police suspected that the children might have had a conflict with their families and left home angrily, subsequently getting lost and unable to find their way back. However, the parents rejected this theory. They insisted that their families were very harmonious, with no shouting or physical punishment involved. The children had no reason to suddenly run away from home. Among the 5 boys, the oldest was Woo Chul-won, 13 years old, and the youngest was Kim Jong-sik, 9 years old. It was hard to believe that such a group of children would leave home together. The police then shifted their investigation to suspecting that someone known to the victims might be involved, thinking that the families of the victims might have had conflicts with someone. However, after investigation, the police confirmed that the families of the 5 boys were all decent people, living peacefully with their neighbors, and had never had conflicts with anyone. Even if there were minor disputes, they would not have led to such brutal actions against innocent children. The police then considered the possibility that the children had been kidnapped. 3 days after the incident, on March 29th, Kim Jong-sik's father and uncle received phone calls from an anonymous caller. The man's voice sounded like he was around 30 years old, claimed to be the kidnapper of the 5 boys, and demanded a ransom of 4 million won to be brought to Mount Waryong for their release. Kim Chul-ju, Kim Jong-sik's father, quickly gathered the money and rushed to the agreed location. He waited for a long time, but no one appeared. Caller also did not make any further contact. After the incident, a young tenant near Jo Ho-yeon's house felt deeply remorseful. He blamed himself, thinking that if he hadn't told the children to go play elsewhere, they might not have gone missing. Police were also criticized by the public for not taking timely action, missing the crucial early period for searching. Initially, news of the case spread only within the village and some neighboring areas. Later, the story of the 5 missing boys was covered by the media, attracting nationwide attention. At first, the media reported that the 5 boys had gone up the mountain to catch frogs, which is why they were called the Frog Boy. However, in reality, they had gone to look for fire salamander egg. To make it easier for the public to understand, The name Frog Boys continued to be used until today. By April 1st, 6 days after the incident, the parents of the boys had printed 50,000 flyers to distribute at train stations, bus stops, and other public places in Daegu. They also offered a reward of 5 million won for any useful information about their children's whereabouts. The situation became increasingly serious and reached the attention of then South Korean President Roh Tae-woo. He was deeply concerned about the case and instructed the police to devote all their resources to the investigation. By special order of the president, police and military forces coordinated to thoroughly search Mount Waryong and the surrounding areas. Almost every inch of the area was meticulously searched. Near Mount Waryong, there is a reservoir where a tragic drowning incident of a child had occurred, leading some to suspect that the Frog Boys might have gone to the reservoir to play after hiking the mountain. To verify this theory, rescue teams used pumps to drain the reservoir, found nothing. As the case garnered more public attention, the phone numbers of the Frog Boys' families were leaked. Police installed wiretapping equipment on these phone lines. Indeed, they received numerous calls afterward. When they answered, they heard children's voices, followed by the sound of the call being hung up. After verification, the police concluded that most of these were prank calls. Of course, it was also possible that the real perpetrator made these calls. There was no way to confirm this. In August 1992, the police received a call from an anonymous man who claimed that the Frog Boys were buried in the basement of a building in Gyeongsangbuk-do. However, when the police pressed for more details, the man immediately hung up. The building described by the man was the only high-rise building with a basement near the Frog Boys' home. Police did not ignore this lead and promptly went to investigate the building, but found nothing and concluded it was another malicious prank. During the search, reporters accompanying the police had disputes with the local residents. The prolonged investigation without results left the parents of the missing boys in utter despair. Despite being continuously disrupted by false information, police did not give up hope. They believed there was still a chance that the boys were alive, possibly kidnapped or sold elsewhere. The reward for information leading to the boys' discovery was increased, or 2 million won. To find their children, the parents of the 5 boys quit their jobs, bought a truck, and traveled around Daegu and even across the country to distribute flyers. Some businesses voluntarily helped by printing the boys' photos on phone cards, candy wrappers, food packaging, and even producing missing persons advertisements on television. A large balloon also carried images of the 5 boys. By November of that year, the police had received nearly 1,000 calls, but most were false reports. By November 1992, a year and a half after the incident, a film inspired by the missing boys case, titled Comeback Frog Boys, was released. The case once again shocked all of South Korea and became a hot topic of discussion. Due to the long-standing deadlock in the case, numerous rumors began to spread. Some said the boys had been kidnapped by North Korean spies, while others claimed they were kidnapped by people suffering from Hansen's disease for medical treatment. Although these theories seemed unreasonable, the police investigated these directions, leading to no results and even conflicts with patients during the investigation. Furthermore, there were even more outlandish rumors, such as the boys not being human and their sudden disappearance being the work of extraterrestrials. Throughout the lengthy search campaign, about 320,000 people from all walks of life, including the military, participated. In 1995, 4 years after the incident, the police used computers to create age-progressed portraits of the boys and printed them on flyers. More than 2 million flyers were distributed, but the results were still false reports. In desperation, the police even turned to shamans for help in locating the boys. As time passed, the missing persons case gradually faded into obscurity. The parents of the boys had to return to their daily lives due to financial pressures. In January 1996, Professor Kim Kwon, a criminal psychology expert from the Korea Institute of Science and Technology, unexpectedly claimed that the boys had been murdered by Kim Jong-sik's father, Mr. Kim Chol-ju, and that their bodies were buried in his home. Mr. Kim Chul-ju was outraged by this sudden accusation and insisted he could never commit such a heinous act against his own children. The Korea Institute of Science and Technology is a top national research university, ranked among the top 5 universities in South Korea. Considering the institute's prestige, police believed Professor Kim. Despite his immense pain and anger, Mr. Kim had no choice but to agree to the police exhuming his home to prove his innocence. In January 1996, following Professor Kim's directions, the police began digging and dismantling Mr. Kim Chul-ju's house. Many curious onlookers gathered outside to see if the man was indeed a murderer. The police searched every part of the house, from the bathroom and storage room to the garden. Reporters were also present to document the event. After 1 hour and 40 minutes, Mr. Kim Chul-ju's house was left in ruins. Nothing was found. Seeing the empty house, the crowd fell silent. Mr. Kim Chul-ju could no longer contain his long-suppressed emotions and shouted in anger, "Losing my children has caused me immense pain. Now I am struggling to keep going, and yet someone is falsely accusing me of burying my children's bodies in my house. It's ridiculous." After this incident, Professor Kim faced severe public criticism, and his unfounded claims caused significant harm to Mr. Kim Chul-ju's family. Professor Kim was subsequently dismissed by the Korea Institute of Science and Technology and prosecuted for defamation. However, he continued to defend his views and even published a book titled "The Children Didn't Go to the Mountain." Although he was exonerated, the ordeal left Mr. Kim Chul-ju in severe mental distress. He succumbed to alcoholism and died of liver cancer in October 2001. Before that, he was a healthy man who had even engaged in bodybuilding in his youth. However, the pain of losing his child combined with alcoholism had destroyed his health. Until his death, he never had the chance to see his beloved son again. In September 2002, 11.5 years after the incident, progress was finally made. On September 26, the police received a tip from a 60-year-old man. He reported that while climbing Mount Waryeong to collect chestnuts, he used a stick to stir up the earth and leaves along the path. When he reached the mid-slope, he discovered an object resembling clothing buried in the soil. Curious, he dug around and was shocked to find a human skull. In fact, a day earlier, the police had also received a similar tip, with the caller reporting seeing bones on Mount Waryeong. However, because they had previously searched the area thoroughly and had received numerous prank calls over the years, the police had ignored the tip, dismissing it as another malicious prank. However, after receiving the second call, the police began to pay attention. They immediately sent personnel to Mount Waryeong to the location provided by the informant. In a shallow pit, they found 4 sets of skeletal remains stacked on top of each other, with a large rock resting on top. About 150 meters away, they found the 5th set of remains, all belonging to teenage boys. The skulls of 3 sets of remains had various sized holes. The clothing found in the soil was not worn normally, but was separated from the bones and tied together. Although the bodies had completely decomposed, the families of the 5 boys confirmed that the clothes were the ones the children had been wearing on the day they went missing. After more than 10 years, the parents who had always hoped their children were alive, living elsewhere, were struck with numb grief upon hearing the tragic news. The police hypothesized that on the night of the incident, the 5 boys had played on the mountain until late, then got lost. To avoid separating, they had tied their jackets together to hold hands. As night fell and temperatures dropped, they huddled together for warmth. They may have accidentally fallen onto sharp rocks, causing unconsciousness. However, this hypothesis was completely rejected by the victims' families. They argued that their homes were located right at the base of Mount Waryeong. Children were not visiting for the first time. They frequently went up the mountain to play, so they were very familiar with the paths. Moreover, the mountain was not high, and even at night, the lights from the houses at the base were clearly visible. The location where the bodies were found was only about 3 kilometers from their homes and 500 meters from the nearest village, but getting lost seemed implausible. Near the crime scene, the police discovered over 10 bullets and cartridge casings of various types. In fact, there is a shooting range of the 50th Infantry Brigade, 2nd Division, near Waryeong Mountain. Thus, the police suspected that the boys might have been killed by stray bullets. However, this hypothesis was quickly dismissed because it is extremely unlikely for 5 people to be struck by bullets at the same time. Furthermore, even if someone were using a gun without authorization, it would be impossible for no one to have heard the gunshot. After comparison, police found that the dents on the victims' skulls did not match the wounds caused by bullets. It is more likely that the bullets were picked up by the boys on the way. The process of excavating the crime scene by the police was recorded and reported by the media. This drew severe criticism from the public. People claimed that the police acted too hastily, failed to protect the crime scene, and displayed a lack of professionalism. The use of pickaxes to dig and then carelessly placing the bones into bags was also condemned. At the scene, the police only examined one set of remains and hastily concluded that the cause of death was due to getting lost and hypothermia. A forensic team from Kyunpuk National University conducted the autopsy. Results showed no clear injuries on the bones of Park Chan-in and Jo Ho-yeon, making it impossible to determine the cause of death. The other 3 boys, Kim Jong-sik, Kim Young-ju, and Woo Chol-won, had multiple injuries on their skulls, including fractures and punctures. Kim Jong-sik had a broken left arm. Among the 5 victims, Woo Chol-won, the oldest, had the most injuries on his body, with up to 25 wounds. The specific time of death could not be determined, but it was likely on the day they went missing. The forensic team concluded that the 5 boys had been murdered. After numerous tests, they finally identified a type of weapon that could cause similar injuries to the victims' skulls. A tool with one pointed end and one flat end used for scraping off welding slag. This type of tool is not commonly used but is essential for welders. However, identifying the perpetrator with only this clue was extremely difficult. Based on the gathered evidence, police reconstructed the case as follows. The 5 boys went up Waryeong Mountain to play and then scattered around the forest to search for fire lizard eggs. During this time, they were suddenly attacked by an unknown assailant. Woo Chol-won, 13 years old, being the oldest, resisted the attacker and was therefore the most severely injured. Kim Jong-sik fled but was caught by the perpetrator, who grabbed him from behind and struck him hard with the weapon. Instinctively, Kim Jong-sik raised his left arm to block, and the attacker took this opportunity to strike him in the head, causing him to collapse. Kim Young-ju tried to escape, but during the struggle, his sleeves and buttons were torn, and eventually he too was struck in the head and fell. After the 3 boys died, the perpetrator controlled Park Chan-in and Jo Ho-yeon. To prevent them from escaping, he removed their clothes, tied them together to form a rope, and strangled them to death. Therefore, there were no visible marks on the bones of the 2 boys. After the 5 boys were motionless, the perpetrator buried their bodies in a hole and placed a large rock on top. He may have done this to prevent the victims from crawling out, or to mark the location. After the crime, the perpetrator might have returned to Waryeong Mountain, or could have been a local resident. The perpetrator's actions seemed both premeditated and impulsive. The use of an uncommon weapon indicates preparation in advance. However, the impulsive aspect is reflected in the fact that the 5 boys could have been random victims as they decided to go to the mountain that morning without prior planning. Moreover, killing 5 people at once is extremely challenging and dangerous, which does not fit with intentionally targeting these boys. The analyses by experts were quickly published by the media, leading to many differing opinions among the public. Several questions were raised. For instance, no hair or teeth of the victims were found at the scene, which are not easily decomposed, leading some to suspect that the site where the bodies were found might not be the original crime scene. Additionally, the method of tying the clothes found at the scene was unusual, and many wondered why the police did not discover the bodies during their thorough search of the area years ago. The police did not provide an official answer to this issue, and it could be because the bodies were buried too deep, only revealing themselves gradually due to rain, wind, and landslides over 10 years. Or perhaps the bodies were not originally buried on the mountain, but were moved there after the police and military completed their inspections, creating a perfect time gap. At that time, Warryong Mountain was a relatively desolate area, and it is possible that the boys encountered a mentally ill person with a history of illness or a serial killer with antisocial tendencies. Some also speculated that the crime occurred during a local council election, and someone might have deliberately caused trouble on Warryong Mountain to gain political benefits, with the 5 unfortunate boys becoming the victims. Near the crime scene, the police also discovered an artificial cave with a small, concealed entrance, just big enough for one person to squeeze through. Inside the cave, there were clear signs of habitation and some objects. Based on the packaging, these items dated back to around 2000, which is quite far from the time of the incident in 1991. Therefore, it is possible that people began living in the cave after the crime occurred. In March 2006, 15 years after the incident, the statute of limitations for criminal cases in South Korea at that time expired. This meant that even if the perpetrator confessed, they could not be criminally prosecuted. From this year, another rumor emerged in the public. It was said that the perpetrator was a family living on Warryong Mountain. This family had a son with intellectual autism and kept a hunting dog. The dog was always chained, but on the day of the incident, family had released the dog to clean and repair its kennel. The son did not supervise carefully, allowing the dog to run out and attack the 5 boys playing on the mountain. Fearing detection, the family brutally murdered all 5 boys to cover their tracks. They then moved away and concealed the matter for many years. However, due to a guilty conscience, they eventually revealed the incident to others. This rumor spread quickly among the Korean public, and many believed it to be true. However, there was no solid evidence from authorities to support this claim. In February 2011, another film based on the Frog Boys case was released, drawing public attention to the case. In 2015, police officially closed the investigation. Over time, the debates surrounding the case gradually subsided. In 2021, a comment on social media unexpectedly brought up the case again. The person speculated that the perpetrator was a teacher from the boys' school. On one hand, the teacher was familiar with the area. On the other hand, in that social context, it was common for teachers to use corporal punishment on students. Thus, the teacher could have easily controlled the boys. Some journalists investigated and concluded that this hypothesis was completely baseless. A year later, another post appeared on social media. The author suggested that the weapon used in the case was a pair of compasses, and the perpetrator was a high school student from a nearby school. This type of compass is usually made of metal and can cause significant harm. According to investigations, there were indeed cases of students using compasses in fights at some schools near Warryong Mountain. Some students frequently gathered on the mountain to smoke and drink. Therefore, it was suggested that the boys might have been attacked by a group of delinquent students. However, this hypothesis also sparked controversy. Some argued that although the injuries on the victims' skulls resembled those caused by a compass, creating such injuries would require a compass over 30 centimeters in length. Such a compass is not only bulky and difficult to carry, but also very noticeable, making this possibility very low. The case of the missing Frog Boys remains a haunting mystery for the people of South Korea. The case exposed flaws in security and raised awareness about child protection mechanisms. Many parents live in fear and anxiety, worried that their children might face similar dangers. Among the 3 mysterious cases that shocked South Korea, the Hwaseong serial murder case, the kidnapping and murder of Lee Hyung-ho, and the Frog Boys case. The Hwaseong case was solved after 33 years, while the Frog Boys case remains an enigma. It is hoped that with advances in science and technology, the truth about the case will be revealed one day. Thank you for watching our video about the mysterious case of the 5 boys catching frogs. If you found this video useful and interesting, don't forget to hit the like button to support our channel. Leave a comment below to share your thoughts on this case and what you'd like to see in future videos. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the notification bell so you won't miss any of our exciting content. See you in the next video. Have a wonderful day.